Well, it's been a little while since we've done one of these, but today I want to drop my list for the top 10 best loadouts for Vondel in Warzone Season 4 for you. I don't think that it's been any surprise that Warzone hasn't really been my favorite in the 2.0 era, but I will say I found the 300 HP refreshing, I found Vondel to be enjoyable, or at least in this honeymoon phase so far, both those things can be true. And until my interest dwindles down again, I've been playing a bunch of it so far, and for anyone interested, today I just wanted to share some of what's been working really well for me and my squad. It's been a good bit since our last one, so as a reminder, these are by no means a definitive 1 to 10 listing, but instead 10 in a varied ranking based on situation, and some weapons just do better for other players. So if you have anything in your top 10 that isn't in this list, feel free to drop your preferred builds down below. If you enjoy the video, you find it at all insightful, do me a favor and drop a like on it. And if you're new to the channel, consider subscribing. I'd love to have you in the community as we gear up for the rest of Season 4 coverage and also some other stuff like X-Defiant here coming early next week and beyond into other FPS content. Finally, check out my friends over at G Fuel for 30% off certain items in the month of June like hype sauce tubs, drinking that right now actually, and much more, but more on that a little later. For now, let's jump into the loadouts and what you should be using for Vondel. So to preface, 300 HP is now a thing within Warzone. That was the big thing with Warzone's update for Season 4, and this is across all modes, not just Vondel. Vondel specifics though we'll touch on in just a second, but 300 HP greatly changes the dynamics of most gunfights. On average, adding about like 2 more rounds to kill by comparison to the base 100 with 150 HP and armor added pre-Season 4. So you're going to want to be trying to maximize for power or damage per mag with builds, giving the highest potential to score as many kills as possible before you have to reload. That said, you also have to be conscious when kitting for Vondel because it's not like Al Mazrah. You're not going to have massive hillsides off the side of Observatory with no cover that you can shoot at players 200 meters away unimpeded. You're not going to be having those sand dunes to traverse and hope your enemies will miss all your shots with no cover and it's just open area. Instead, Vondel is geared towards a lot of close quarters and mid-range gunfights. I'll throw in a sniping build here in this because it is possible, and honestly it's quite fun with the one-shot potential, but a lot of this you'll want to try and find that balance between damage per mag and maximum output, having enough rounds on hand because it is going to be hectic. A lot of times you'll have players dropping back in on you on your heads, so you might have to take 1, 2, 3, maybe 4 gunfights, and you don't want to have to be reloading after every single kill, but also then you want to make sure that you're covered for things like mobility as well. So it's a hard balance to strike, but I think we can do it. So let's jump into these builds. Firstly, with that being said about the damage per mag, the LMG meta is absolutely back in full swing after this update with the increase to the health. The HCR 56 is what I would say is probably one of the contenders here for the top meta weapon right now, as it's very easy to control, has a high damage output, and you don't have to sacrifice any attachment to get a preferred magazine here. 60 is the base default. So for this, I'd recommend the AMOP V4 optic, the Harbinger D20 muzzle, the FTAC Ripper 56 underbarrel, the 5.56 high velocity ammunition, and the STIP 40 grip. This giving you a weapon that will shoot straight and do a ton of damage. It's a lot of fun to play around with this one, honestly. And it's nice because we haven't really seen the HCR before Season 4 be a primary meta weapon, so it's a nice deviation, even though it is still in that LMG classification. You're not back to like the RPK meta or anything like that. Now, we will touch on another LMG here in just a second, as well as a third later on in the list, but before that, I want to jump over to a rifle that's been a lot of fun to play with, that being the Lachmann 5.56. Now, again, it's been a while since we've talked about top 10 loadouts here on the channel, since last season's launch in fact, but the Lachmann has been something that has been a very good and solid weapon to choose in relation to top 10 weaponry, though we haven't really touched on it before. The Lachmann is one that's stable, it's got decent mobility, it's got decent recoil control, and honestly it's just a general all-around good weapon if you were to ask me. Is it outclassified in terms of damage per mag by the HCR, by other LMGs? Sure, but if you want a rifle to play with, this is probably my top pick right now as of this update. For this, I'd run the AMOP V4, I'd run the 15.9-inch Lachmann wrap barrel, the Echoless 80, the FTAC Ripper, and the 60-round magazine to round out that build. Now, again, jumping back to another LMG here, the Sakin MG38, we've talked about this one quite a few times before. It has been in the mix a handful of times, but it definitely is back now at this point. For this, I'd run the AMOP V4 optic, the 20-inch Bruin Silver Series barrel, the Polar Fire S, the Edge 47 grip, and the STIP 40 grip. Now, if you want to sacrifice one of those for like a high velocity ammunition, you can indeed do that, but it's not necessarily needed per se. If you're playing for medium range, you don't necessarily need it, but if you are playing for like long range or trying to shoot people out of the sky, you might notice a bit of an improvement with high velocity rounds, but again, entirely subjective and up to you. Now, rounding out our sort of top 5 before we get over the hump here in this video, I want to talk about two SMGs here in particular that I think are the standouts still for Season 4. That firstly being the Lachmann sub. This, the MP5 build, is something that, yes, we've seen this before in Season 3. It's been a favorite within ranked play since its introduction, and it still is one that does very well. Though there is one slight difference here that I would recommend now in Season 4 compared to Season 3. For this, I'd run the VLK Laser 7mW, the L38 Falcon 226mm barrel, the overpressured rounds, the Mir Recoil 56 factory stock, and again, that imperative change here is the 50-round drum mag. The health increase really requires this because you will absolutely run out of ammo in gunfights, especially if you have to finish players, they still have a self-revive. That's definitely something you're going to want to have that extra 10 rounds on hand. So highly recommend running that with the 50 round, and the rest of that build still very much so holds up. The final weapon before we round into the second half of the video is the ISO 45. Now this one is again the first of two new weapons we'll talk about in this top 10, but it is one that's an SMG, a little less forgiving if you miss your shots, but if you land, you will have more potential damage per round and mag compared to the MP5. So it really comes down to, do you trust your shots or not? Do you want a little bit of forgiveness if you miss a round or two? For this, I'd recommend the VLK Laser 7mW, the Lockshot KT85, the 45 round drum, the EXP Shear, and the SK3 Cheetah stock. This being built more so for mobility than really anything else, and of course, having that mobility allows you to traverse and get in and out of gunfights or buildings faster than others, sometimes being fast enough to cut off an enemy, or maybe just fast enough to get away with your life if you end up taking damage. But that's our first 5 here at this, and real quickly before we continue, make sure to check out my friends over at G Fuel for 20% off all the time with code Espresso, but 30% off items for the month of June on tubs of hype sauce, hibiscus tea, MS melon, and more, as well as starter kits. So if you haven't tried G Fuel before, now is as best a time as any with that starter kit discounted in those tubs. Can't go wrong there. I mentioned it before in the intro, hype sauce is the flavor of choice today and is in the regular rotation. It's in my top 3, along with like the Morbius nectarine flavor. Then I'll have like a number 3 rotating flavor of starfruit or strawberry banana, something like that. But if you're interested, check the link in the description below for more information and use code Espresso for up to 30% off your entire order. But for now, let's get back into those loadouts. Next up, I want to talk about the Cronen Squall, one that was the definite meta here as of last season. But it's interesting because with this update, the semi-auto damage was brought down, full auto damage brought up. Not quite sure if they're really one-to-one and in line now, but the damage disparity was absurd beforehand. So with it being closer in line now, it's definitely still a very valid weapon, but using it in full auto is more valid than it was beforehand. So using it in full auto or semi, more so personal preference at this point, but it is something that will still get the job done. For this, I'd recommend the AMOP V4 optic, the HR 6.8 barrel, the Sakin Tread 40, the FTAC Ripper 56, and the 50 round drum magazine. Beyond that, we're going to move on over into the second new weapon here of choice, this being the Tempus Razorback. And this, whenever I played early at Infinity Ward earlier last week before everything went down, this was my preliminary guess for what would be a new great sniper support weapon. And I do actually kind of think that that assumption holds up here, or at least from my experience it does. It can very well be kitted for long range, but personally, I like it more as a close quarters and mid-range weapon, allowing me the freedom of mobility with also the damage of a rifle to just absolutely shred. Comparable, I think, to the FFAR from Black Ops Cold War, but it also allows me to keep that secondary free for a sniper to take players out from afar. For this, I'd recommend the 16-inch Tanker V barrel, the Komodo Heavy, the Edge 47, the 60-round mag, and the Cassis X rear grip. So that's just one that is a lot of fun to play around with, I think. Give it a try if you haven't, rank that up, and give it a go. Beyond that, we're going to round out number 8 and 9 slots here with two weapons that are very good, but definitely are outclassed by others that we've already talked about. Firstly, the M4A1. This, again, still a jack-of-all-trades weapons. It really wasn't necessarily your best choice for Al Mazrah or something like that. It was decent in Ashika Island, and for the same reasons why it's decent here in Vondel. It's very easy to control, but you're also not taking as many long-range engagements where the damage drops off significantly then. For this, I'd recommend the AMOP V4 optic, the High Tower 20-inch barrel, the Sakin Tread 40 muzzle, the FTAC Ripper underbarrel, and the 60-round magazine. Now, it is optional if you do not want an optic, you like the iron sights, or you don't feel you need it necessarily, you can get by with the iron sights, throw on the high velocity rounds in place of that, or you can throw on a rear grip, laser, or stock if you want to add ADS speed. So there's a bit to work with that, absolutely. Finally, number 9 here that we'll talk about before we jump into our sniper build is that of the RAAL. Now, the RAAL is one that we've seen before. It's a powerhouse of a weapon when it comes to damage per round, but it's just something that's a bit bulkier, a bit slower firing than other LMGs that we've talked about, which is why I think the HCR and the Sakin both outclassify it. But if you want to use it, absolutely still valid, and for that, I'd recommend the AMOP V4 optic, the 21-inch EXF Rhino barrel, the Shred CP90 muzzle, the 50-round belt mag to give you a little bit of that ADS speed back, whereas, of course, you don't need 75 rounds. Absolutely, you can get away with it, but you can get a bit more mobility back with just 50, and then the Bruin Q900 grip to add a little bit more sprint to fire and ADS speed. Now, finally, the last weapon we'll talk about is, of course, a sniper here at this, and sniping, I've had a lot of fun sniping again. I'm here for it. Sniping in Warzone 1 on Verdansk with the Kar 98K or the Swiss, truly some of my favorite Warzone times, and having not played a ton during the resurgence of the one-shot meta back in, what, last season or the season before? I honestly couldn't even tell you. It's nice to be able to come back and get some nice shots off and take players down from afar in one shot. I still wish that it wasn't dependent upon a crutch attachment of the explosive rounds, but it is what it is. For this, my personal sniper of choice lately has been the MCPR 300. I feel like this is one of the easiest to kit for ADS and mobility, along with keeping that one-shot potential of the snipers. So for this, I'd recommend the Forge Tac Delta 4 22-point-inch OMX 456 barrel, the Nil Sound 90 muzzle, the 300 mag explosive rounds, and the 5-round magazine for a bit more ADS, movement speed, and sprint to fire speed. But that said, that is my top 10 loadouts here of choice for Vondel. Let me know how you guys feel down below. Do you like any of these weapons in particular? Anything you'd add to this list? How you liking Vondel in general? Let me know your thoughts down below. But if you enjoyed the video, you find it at all insightful, do me a favor and drop a like on it. And if you're new to the channel, consider subscribing to stay updated with all things Modern Warfare 2, Warzone, and of course, other content in the FPS category like X Defiant here upcoming. But for now, that's what we're gonna call it. So thanks so much for watching. Mine has been Espresso. I'll see you later. Take care and peace.